Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. How are you?
Oh, we are fantastic.
Mark, how are
Welcome
you?
to the show,
I'm
Mark.
doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
This is
we're
great.
excited to have you here today.
Thank you.
Audience, hopefully you know a little bit about me and Kevin. We'll do a quick round of introductions, but we'll hit on you. We want to hit on you, Mark. Chris Wagner, MVP, Director of Data Solutions, Baker Tilly. Hopefully you've been joining the show for a while. If you haven't, if this is your first time, why don't you type hashtag new inside the chat so we know about you? Love to love to hear about you. Kevin, why don't you do a quick introduction?
Yeah, Kevin Arnold, also an MVP. I have a data consulting company out of Dallas, Texas. Happy to be here as well. But, the spotlight today needs to be on the guy in the middle. Mark,
Hey,
introduce
thank,
Yes.
yourself.
thank you. My name is Mark Walter. I work for Industrial Finishes out here in Oregon. I'm a BI director and very passionate business side BI guy.
Thank you.
Well, Mark, we're so excited to have you. We know you from SML
Hmm.
Live. We've connected and we've been talking and chatting with you for several years now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think we have a uh, you know a
Our hashtag.
yes our hashtag uh, like popular enough. I have a graphic for it, so. Um, I'm excited to have a conversation with you because what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about the different roles and team structures uh, that companies are going to be using when it comes to working with Fabric. And I think your perspective is very valuable in this space because
Oh,
you
thank
come
you.
from a small shop, right?
hmm Yeah, I come from a medium-sized business. We're a wholesale distributor.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 40 locations nationwide, so I feel like we have enough departmental needs for BI, enough data for sure, and moving parts that I start asking myself questions from a medium business perspective of with the opportunity of Fabric and the automation and the upcoming AI that it promises, how does that change my role as a business analyst BI user? And does it expand into more of an IT-ish role where we're
Hmm.
now bleeding together and considering how to better collaborate with each other?
I am
Yeah.
super looking forward to getting into this conversation. Um, So we're going to do a little bit of a teaser on that one because we want to keep people with us, stay with us till the end. I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. I have a couple housekeeping rules before we dive too deep into uh, this. I do want to call out, hey, Stina, he just got his Fabric Friday T-shirt in the mail last week, so that is awesome. If you are looking for your own Fabric T-shirt, you could do that yourself. Here is a QR code you can scan. You can go in and get that, or you can click on. I believe maybe that works both ways. I don't know. Click on this. You can go ahead and order yourselves up a Fabric T-shirt yourselves. So, but before we go too far into that, we do want to let people know, like, hey, this is a conversation that we're going to be having, but we want you to be part of the conversation.
Hmm.
So if you have questions, comments, or information, please post those down into the chat. We are going to be following Guy in the Cube / Matthew Roche rules. So we got rule number 1. Please prefix all questions with a Q. That helps it get queued up, and we can kind of manage that stuff. Pretty simple. And then please do not spam or repeat questions. Uh, we haven't had any issues with that so far, but one day we'll have a big group of people, and that'll become a problem. And then our moderators will come through and put you on timeouts, and we don't want to do any of that stuff. Okay, so let's not do that. But before we get into the main topic of the day, Kevin has a number of updates and just kind of like FYIs that are occurring inside the Fabric space today that we want to like quick go through and show off. So, Kevin?
Yeah, we just wanted to highlight a couple posts that have come out the last couple days. Um, so, Chris, are you okay? There it is. I see
Yep.
my screen sharing
Sorry.
now. It's okay. Hey, we're there. It's early morning on a Friday. You know, what can we expect? So yeah, I grabbed a couple posts that I just found on LinkedIn to kind of help people, find other opportunities to learn more about fabric. Um, so if you haven't seen these, hopefully it'll help you out, and we'll put them into the chat and everything. So there's uh, a multi-part blog post that has been coming out about data factory and data pipelines. So part one kind of talked about performance improvements, how to convert some time intervals. And now recently, if I back up, if I do this correctly, this week, part two has come out. So if you want to jump into data pipelines, especially the performance part of it, how to work with it, right? It's going to be a learning opportunity to read through, work some of the exercises, kind of cover it. So, and then keeping along that data pipeline part of it, Microsoft has a data factory, a fabric data factory webinar series coming up. And I just saw this yesterday and I thought it was real interesting. These webinar series that they put together have been really good in the past on the ones that I've attended. So I expect them to be good. High expectations. I don't know if Alex is here, but he's the one that's posted this. So I have high expectations, Microsoft. You better deliver.
It's not a threat.
That's not
So
a
far,
threat.
so good.
Until it has to be.
Uh,
Yeah, so go out here, watch some or get involved with these. Hopefully you could attend live, but usually they're also recorded, so you could attend afterwards if you need to. So register. There's US and APAC friendly time zones. So hopefully you can find something that's going to work for you. So those are the. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, let's not forget the next big one.
The next big one.
Don't be self-deprecating and non-promoting here. This is a good one.
So I may have teased this a little bit. May not have fully understood what I was talking about, but myself and 3 other MVPs worked on a video for Microsoft for Fabric, and I'm happy to say that it got released. It's got 1.2 thousand views. So I'm really happy about this. But yeah, it Alex appeared. Nice. So yeah, go out and look at this. We put a lot of effort into it. We're very proud of the work that the 4 of us put together. It is a great video. So hopefully, you'll learn something and enjoy it. So I got to go through the comments a little bit more and see what people look like. So, Mark, I think you mentioned yeah. Well, yeah. There's comments on the video down below. So, Mark, I think you mentioned you looked at this video. What were you? And be honest, just because I'm here. So.
No. I've been asking Kevin and Chris in our little networking group about the medallion infrastructure. I was fascinated by this idea of bronze, silver, gold, and Kevin kept telling me to keep waiting. There's something coming, and so I was very happy to see it. I watched it, really enjoyed it. Haven't had a chance to work through it quite yet, but I did watch it and thought it was a wealth of information for someone like me.
Great.
So thank you.
Yeah. So Chris, that's all my announcements for today.
Okay. Awesome. So, and I think we've got through the rough start. We got everyone engaged. So we do want to hear from you guys. What are your experiences in Fabric so far? Are you using it? Are you playing with it? Have you tried experimenting with it? I just had to spin up my own capacity the other day, and so I kind of recorded it and put a video out there on it. Some of you liked it, some of you didn't, but do check it out if you're wondering, how do I spin up a capacity? What do you have to do? What are some of the thoughts or considerations? Do check that out. Okay, so leave a message in the chat if you're using that. All of the chat systems really help us drive engagement and that stuff, so that also helps the channel too. So, but enough of that. Let's head over to our main topic. And Kevin, do you want to introduce this topic? You're the one who brought this up, and I liked it. So
Yeah, well, I'll introduce it, but I'll probably quickly throw it to Mark because he's actually the one that has driven this topic for me for a couple weeks now. And we've been kind of in a long-term conversation, not relationship, Mark, conversation about
Keep it
this, right?
PG. Yeah.
So, as Chris mentioned, we get together on Saturday mornings on a group that we call Saturday Morning Learning. And we've been talking quite a bit about, how is fabric changing what people are going to do, right? And I think there's multiple views out there. I think there's going to be multiple levels of what changes based upon what size your business is. And Chris and I actually discussed this just a little bit as well. And Chris has, I think, the bigger enterprise view on this from the conversations I've had from him from trying to learn. Mark has the the small medium business, the SMB view, and there's a couple others in the chat that I know have joined Saturday Morning Learning and giving some of their input as well. So I've asked them, if the examples come up, I could share that as well. So I think it's a very interesting conversation when you kind of look at it from where are we 7 years ago with Power BI, 8 years, something like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And think about how Power BI has changed some people's lives. I've heard that all the time, right? It was so easy to kind of get into, easy to make it as the SaaS service and everything. Now, Fabric is going to push that just a little bit more. So it's going to change some people's lives, which means what we do on a day-to-day basis at work is going to change as well. So that's what we want to kind of discuss here with Mark, with Chris, and with you into the chat. So, Mark, I'm going to throw it to you first, right?
No.
In your role that you were doing at your company, you do a lot of the BI work.
Right.
You've shared a lot of success stories on how putting nice reports together has helped you even have better client conversations where you showed them something and it really kind of clicked with them and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And just prior to Fabric coming out, you were trying to do some other type of things, and
Yeah.
you may not have been as successful, but now you're kind of seeing some things. Can you share a little bit more about how that went for you and what that
Yeah.
little bit of journey was?
Yeah, sure. So a little bit about my journey. I'm a finance Excel guy from about 10 years ago, and I was fairly new here in my accounting role, and always wanted to upskill and keep current with technology in my role. Was looking for something new, and about right about that time, 2013 ish, I discovered Power Pivot on YouTube, and it just kind of got sucked into the wave of being able to automate my analytics in Excel at scale. Learned DAX fairly early then, and of course that rolled into Power BI, and you bring in to it the BI aspect, and all of a sudden my analytics was so much richer. The visuals just had a greater impact on my internal audience here at IF. We eventually rolled that out into the body shops that we work with. And if you know anything about working with body shops and trying to bring them a spreadsheet, it doesn't work very well. But we bring them BI and work through a data story with those shop owners. And all of a sudden we find success in sharing BI, in sharing that data dialogue. And that really is what caught me on fire for data storytelling. So I got very much into data storytelling, using visuals, but also into DAX as well. Fast forward now to Fabric, and I'm now experimenting on ways to get more involved at the enterprise level with self-service analytics and BI with other people in my organizations. I'm now looking for other developers out in departments to be able to query and do their own analytics. I experiment with Synapse,
Mhm.
right? So this is like November-ish. And I get into Synapse and I just find too many knobs and buttons that I'm not
Mhm.
familiar with. And we talked about it on SML. I feel like I gave it a good go, but I ended up bailing on it. Fabric gets released in May. I like it in the SaaS environment. I'm familiar with it. I start the learn content from Microsoft, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden I have that Power BI feeling again, right? Like this is going to be another wave of learning and opportunity with automation and with the advent of AI, where my role may expand again.
Yeah. So I want to kind of back up just a little bit on that success story, and you see Chris put up the graphic of how this has brought IT, or the roles that occur in IT and the roles that occur in business closer and more of an overlap. And you had a good point when we were discussing all of this, is how this Venn diagram is coming together for you. But I do want to kind of bring up that point of, because I remember the problem that you approached us with early on, and we talked about using something like Synapse to address that problem and
Right.
everything. And at that time, as MVPs, Chris and I kind of already knew some things that were coming out, and I asked you a question like, "Could you wait till later in the year?" And you didn't know exactly why, right? So it
Right.
seemed like this was going to help you, but um, you found Synapse. It's not that it couldn't have done what you were doing, but because of all the knobs and all the stuff that you had to kind of
Right.
do, you were
Right.
lost in the minutia of learning that part of it rather
I
than just
couldn't,
solving.
yeah, I couldn't get past the initial setup, really.
Yeah, yeah, just right, exactly. All of that minutia is what I'm kind of talking about, right? But then you took the exact same problem, how quickly you stood up a fabric
Yeah.
capacity,
Yeah.
and I think you learned a little bit of things because I think we directed you to look at the Python or whatever from all the
Yeah.
conversations you had with people. But then very quickly, I think you even wrote a blog post about, because it was something with JSON, right, that you were looking at,
Yeah.
and
So I wanted to plug in directly to our ERP and stop or get off of CSVs. And so I was on a mission to flatten JSON strings. And I thought Synapse would be that answer, but you're right. You guys directed me to notebooks. I got hooked on PySpark,
Mhm.
and really didn't take long to be able to flatten a small sample file. So I was excited about that.
Yeah, so that's a great success story, and just I think this is one thing we keep talking about, right? As I think it will increase, how Chris showed IT and business coming closer together because the ease of setup, right? There's not so many things you have to do behind the scenes,
Right.
right? So tell us, again, kind of looking at that slide, excuse me, so now going forward, what roles did you kind of see IT more traditionally
Mhm.
playing that you think you will get even more into going forward?
So after we worked on Synapse and we got early success with that, I started playing around with the different experiences and the artifacts or the structures of Fabric, like the domains, the workspaces, experimenting with lake houses, and really started thinking about what does this mean going forward if my
Mhm.
vision is to share BI and self-service with the rest of the organization. What kind of structure do we have to put in place, and who's the best person for it?
Mhm.
And so in hindsight, I'm working in BI and I realize I'm doing a very local version of ETL, uh, data modeling. I'm cleaning data, but now you open me up into Fabric, and it just seems like a larger role that I should be more of a collaboration or central BI team
Yeah.
approach. And I start looking for the the guy next to me in IT who might be interested in teaming up with me. And then we start thinking, well, how do our roles meet,
Mhm.
and how best can we facilitate and guard our data going forward?
Yeah. So Chris has up here now, the data analyst, and I'm going to put you in the data analyst role first, right?
Hmm.
because I think that's where you were saying you're mostly living, right? But as a data analyst, kind of bringing some things in, and what Power BI opened up with the Power Query type of thing, like you said, you could do a lot of ETL type work, right? You're going to do a lot of changes to shape your data into somebody put into the chat, Donald, Kimball approach, right?
Yeah.
So, but sometimes, hey, Power Query, as great as it is, Alex, right? We hit limitations, right? Or we hit things that we want to do more efficiently. So the role that Chris put up here, the data engineer, is that really the first role you see as the data analyst? You're backing yourself into that part as the data engineer now. Would you say you're building those skills?
Well, I'm definitely fascinated by it. I love the idea of notebooks. I know I'm not the only one learning PySpark. I think Alex is intrigued by Spark as well.
Mhm.
So I do have ambitions to expand myself into more of an engineering role with transformations and kind of I guess data flows, for lack of a better term, with notebooks.
Yeah. So, Chris, I don't know if you see Donald's question, because I
Yep.
think it fits in here real well at this part of the
Yeah, Donald's
conversation.
asking, where does data modeling fit in? And I think that's a great question, because I think especially in like a small organization, you're going to find a situation like this where you've got someone like yourself, Mark, who ends up having to wear many of these hats, right?
Hmm.
And you're the data engineer, the data analyst, the data modeler. Can I also probably say a report author, right?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Right?
And me working at a medium-sized business, I tend to lean more towards the report and storytelling side, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. But yeah, I wear a lot of hats here. I am our BI guy. I'm the evangelist for our company. But I also want to see other people pick up that role, and I know I have to kind of go backwards closer to IT in order to do it. So I don't want to wear all the hats. My hope is that I have a team.
Right, but
But
I think
but
today you're wearing a lot of these. So let me ask
um,
you a question:
sure,
Do you have to support these reports when they go up and down?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so when that you have to monitor for refreshes and all that good stuff, right? So
Well,
you've got
yeah.
these hats, right? Uh-oh.
And I will throw in that I have a team member, so he's going to see this video. So I need to mention that I have a very capable team member that I share these responsibilities with.
Okay, so you're distributing them amongst but you're kind of, the two of you are wearing all of these hats, right? Um, uh, what about like business analysis? Is that something that you do too?
I yes, I'm the primary analyst at the corporate level for the executive team and for sales.
Okay. And are you the one who presents this too?
I am for sure.
Okay, you're the one who presents it. All right.
It's a
What
lot of
other hats
hats.
do you? Yeah.
That's enough.
But I think that this is the reality of it, right? Like, and data science is probably something you've heard about, but you don't really have time to, because you have all of these hats that you're wearing, right?
Yeah, I'd probably never call myself a data scientist,
Okay.
but yeah.
You'll get
Thank
there.
you. We'll see.
All
Yeah,
right.
so with that, right? But
Mhm.
you've had to, I think, in somewhat like Chris has pointed out, you're slicing your time across all these roles, and some of this, it's some fabric is making it easier to get into a lot of these, right?
Yep.
Um, Chris, can you kind of contrast this with your experience that you've seen at your bigger enterprise clients,
Sure.
right? Do a lot of the bigger shops actually take each one of those hats and almost put it on one person, right? What do you
Well,
see?
yeah, when you get into a larger company, the big thing we do is we start to really separate out the business from the technical functions, right? So when we talk technical functions, that's data engineering, that's support, that's potentially the report author. But you have your business analyst, your data analyst, the person who presents and shares, and your
Right.
evangelist. That all sits on the business side. So you kind of get a different grouping. And I think what ends up happening often is it's an evolution from where Mark is, right? Where you have you go from like an SMB shop to, or you start to scale the work that you're doing, right? And so you start to divide up the hats that are there, but you don't necessarily give them all up, right? You don't go to a one-on-one, right? So you've got, Mark, you've got a team of people that you start to build and manage that front end aspect of it, that relationship with the business, getting that product out. In fact, maybe this is like the product team, right? So that's your BI product.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got that front end side, and then you get this back end team that does work on the back side to make sure that things are up and running and operational, right? But then as this goes along, I think as you start to scale and as this gets bigger, you start to see that like all of these positions start to like have different people that get assigned to these different roles, right? Like you suddenly have a team of data analysts, right? You have a team of people that manage the BI product, right? Everyone starts to play their different role, and you may even get to the point where it's all split out and shared with very little overlap, but there's still some potential like uh, uh, splits in there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And people that wear multiple hats, right?
Yeah, I would even kind of think that your report author hat,
Mm-hmm.
you might even kind of duplicate that across the entire team, right? And some people are going to be better at it than others, but probably everybody is going to produce some level of a report, right? So you may take a hat and say, it's not really just assigned to this team, but somebody that's the business analyst, right? They'll be the analyst and a report author.
Yep.
Especially with what Mark has brought up a couple times, right? Trying to get to this big utopia that everybody wants is self-service, right? And
Mm-hmm.
self-service is really really challenging to achieve well, but it is possible. And there's a couple places that I've been at that we've defined self-service kind of two definitions. Self-service of being able to take an interactive report, know how to filter everything correctly, right? And do the good business analysis that you have here. So you're separating who authored the report to the business analyst, right? They're two different roles, but again, it's kind of report level self-servicing by knowing how to do all the filtering and what to pull in by understanding the business context. To self-service report authoring, right? So your own, like your IT group is going through
Mm-hmm.
your data engineering and your data modeling that you have up there,
Mm-hmm.
and then that they kind of stop, and the rest of the business that tries to do all the report authoring as self-service. Is that
Well,
where you're trying to get to, Mark? Or
Well, it's a nice idea for me to be able to say that IT is going to take on the modeling, but I think
Mhm.
in a smaller business like ours, I envision that the business side or a central BI team, if you want to call it that, is going to keep all things data. So, well, not all things, but the modeling, the movement of data, the cleansing, maybe at the silver layer of the
Mhm.
mm-hmm.
medallion architecture, and that I'd be looking to IT for more of the security aspects of keeping the data safe and in the right hands.
Well, here is where I think the concept of domain starts to play in as you start to get really bigger, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're talking about a domain having ownership over their data, and the reason for that being they know this data better than anyone else, right?
Mhm.
And when I think about a domain, right, you're going to have different domains out there, right? Like uh, IT, HR, finance, and those different capabilities, right? And
Right.
this is where I think we start to see a very relevant uh, separation of duties, right? And if I think about what a domain manages and what IT manages, because in some aspects, I think IT is a domain, and other
Hmm.
aspects, I think
Hmm.
IT is a support organization, right? So I think there's the support hat and that support role, that support person. I'm going to bring her up here, right? This is going to go into IT as well as the administration, right? So these activities, I think we had a question come in about like, hey, this came in from Christopher Jones over on LinkedIn. Does Microsoft have guides available to help analysts give IT buy-in? I've had to fight the same battle with PBI, DevMarch, Power Apps, and now Fabric. This is
Mhm.
so true,
That's a great question.
right? This is where also we'll say a architect can really help play out in that role, and like that's something that should be like that centrally managed team and capability, right? Put them in to assist with that, so that they can help you with articulating the value uh, of these capabilities and features within uh, this space, right? But here, this actually goes into I do want to address Donald's question about where does data modeling fit in, analytics engineer, BI developer, and then also uh, Riga's question here about will data engineering be more accountable to design, implement data and network security related solutions?
Hmm.
Uh, it's
And
at
I
that.
think that that's sorry.
Go ahead.
And I think that that's the crux of the question is where do you start seeing with Fabric these roles start to intersect?
Yep, yep. And so this is where I think in a domain level we start to have data engineers that exist inside of a domain, and the reason why it should
Well,
be
Chris, can I,
yeah,
before you move on, can I
yep,
get you to just give your quick definition of the word domain? What you mean by that, or a couple examples?
sure. Yeah, a domain is the different areas inside of your organization, like IT, finance, HR, operations, product, um, uh,
And the data related with that, right?
and
So say
correct,
in the HR domain, right, would keep things about employment,
right.
right? Employee records and everything else. Now you might have different employee reporting even over to say the finance domain, right? But
Hmm.
you're going to separate those two things as when we talk about them as domains. They're going to intersect, but that you really want to have that understanding, correct?
Mhm.
That is right.
Okay.
And you're going to find that you're probably going to need, especially in larger companies, you're going to have lots of data engineers that are going to come in and support a given domain, right? Your data modeler, you might have one or two of them, and this is your analytics engineer, right? So that was a question, right? These are the
Mhm.
people who manage your data models, your measures, your security, all of that type of a thing.
Hmm.
But for every data modeler you have, you're going to have many, many report authors, right? You should have like a fleet of people that are building out reports and working with the different business lines to engage with them. And similarly, you're going to have these fleet of these business analysts that are out meeting with the businesses, making sure that they're getting consistent definitions. Um, these two teams can share common hats. I think a lot of organizations they're not sharing. Oop, this picture's not super clear. Let me move this up. Sorry.
Here, let me push it up. There you
Thank you.
go.
you're going to find that, like, hey, this team needs to have detailed business knowledge and understanding of what's going on in the business, like the day-to-day operations. They're going to be meeting with the people that are like in your shops, in your field offices, right? And they're going to be working in conjunction with the report authors to make sure they've got everything up and running. Your BI product team, oops, I want to do that. Your BI product team will kind of sit between those spaces, right? Or they can sit between those spaces and help make sure that the domains are getting everything they need from that central IT team, right? And then your data analysts will end up being out as well amongst your people. And again, this might be the type of position that shares hats between report authors and business analysts, right? And then your data scientist.
Yes,
I'm going to just one last comment.
sure.
I think an organization should have a lead PhD, data scientist with a handful of people underneath them that are learning and adapting and getting more from that. So that down.
Yeah, I like how you're going with this, right? And then I think we should try to contrast it back again to, what can a small business utilize from that? But if you go back to that slide that you had,
Oh, okay. This one.
the one that was the whole enterprise.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Here.
that one. Okay. Because while you were building this out, Donald put a very specific comment in here about conformed common dimensions being the responsibility of the BI COE team, right? And the way I'm seeing you having this drawn out, I think the data modelers are a lot responsible for that as well. What was your kind of intent, and as you're kind of drawing it out, if we talk a very specific detail, I need to have a conformed dimension, right? A common dimension that's going to be shared across domains. Where does that fall in this diagram you just put together?
That's a great question. Often, I won't say this is all the time, but we end up seeing a flavor of architect that is the data architect, or that sits at that enterprise oversight role to help provide that guidance to the different teams. And like, hey, we don't want to have 15 customer tables. Let's determine who owns customer, and then they create the baseline definition for customer, and people can leverage and use that. But then you might have domain specific flavors of that that's applicable, right?
So in a larger company, Chris, does that person is that person a leader of like a center of excellence, or are they collaborating with other people that represent those other domains?
That data engineer who's designing that, or I'm sorry, data architect who designs that, works with the data modelers to make sure that we have alignment with it. Also, it's working with the domains to make sure that you've established ownership. And honestly, one thing we're missing here is governance. Right? And governance is going to be a big one. That really starts to take shape when you're in a large organization. And some people look at governance as like this big detractor or big problem, but I think of governance much more as an enabler and allowing people to move much more quickly in the long run. Sometimes in the short run, there's some like speed bumps. But I think if they do things right and they govern correctly, it allows people to go much faster and address gaps in your issue, right? Like, so let's take customer. If every department, every domain has their own version of customer, who's right? Who's, everyone's numbers are going to be different. Everyone's going to be like, executives are going to have all sorts of questions around the validity of the data, like where are these metrics coming from? And there is a lot of loss of time and energy at that higher level when it comes to engaging with the work that people often mistake. Like, oh, hey, I put my customer table out as a BI team or data team, right? If you're in a smaller position like that, or a smaller org, or your org is doing this all over the place, this team of people don't realize that there's an identical team like that, and all the confusion they're causing up at that presentation level with executives with clarity. So that governance can help bring those together. And I do have a pretty oh jeez, what I do? Oh no, I deleted everything.
Oh no.
Okay, oof. Okay,
we'll see how good SharePoint
Control
works.
Z. There we go. There we go.
So as we're recovering from that, right? I think this is a good place. I don't know if you saw Jack's question, right? But his was, where do you see the concept of center of excellence being required for this new journey, right? And I don't think it's any different because of Fabric. And as we're talking governance, right? COE and governance a lot of times go hand in hand. They kind of come out at the same time. I think you have to have a center of excellence in order to have a good governance program. And when you look at the Microsoft roadmaps and everything that people like Melissa have contributed to, it's always on there. So, I think you have your COE. I would have drawn it the same way. Yeah, you got this bubble across all of it, right? That you have to get this organization going. And I'd still rely on the documentation that Microsoft has out there for the COE for Power BI and just expand it a little bit. All of the concepts still apply to what we're doing in Fabric, because all of these people were involved in the COE even when Power BI was around, if you were doing that correctly.
And I think that the COE becomes more relevant for smaller companies with the technology or with the automation and AI that Fabric promises to bring us. We've got to be ready for other departments getting into Fabric and having more expanded capabilities, and make sure that everything's on the same page.
Yeah. And so now and I'm glad you jumped in on that, Mark, because to take this larger organization picture that Chris drew out for us, which is great. In the smaller companies, like yourself, you say you have a small team, right? We got Stina in Texas, who's been in the chat, and I've talked with her in the past. But she's pretty much a team of one, right? It's just her company is that small. But it doesn't mean that she doesn't play each one of these roles at some point. And I think what's important for people is to understand that the roles exist and then take what you need to know from each one. You may not be playing the role of architect 100% of the time, and you don't have to learn in depth the role of a data architect. But if you're reading different material, you're watching videos, you know it at least exists, and you could glean those little nuggets out of that. That's going to help you do your entire job.
Sure.
Right. So I think even a small company could learn from knowing these roles. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, and I think it's also important to recognize, especially to executives who are going to come in with, like, they're going to have read a LinkedIn post that's 5 lines long, right? Maybe, and they only read the first 3 that that they thought it was interesting, and they're going to come in and they're going to ask for things. Oh my gosh, did I delete it? They're going to ask for things like this, right? Like, well, what's your data governance policy and strategy, and where's our BI product owner? Right? They're going to ask for questions that are appropriate when you have these degrees of complexity, and be able to spell this out and say, like, hey, you know what? When we're 5,000 people and we've got a team of 100, this is how we're going to structure it. And really our next step is we want to grow to like this structure, our next, like maybe next year's goal is this, right? Like here's 5 years, here's 1 year or 2 years, and then but here's today. I think that's a very important story and journey to set out there, to level set expectations of where you are today, where you'd like to be in the future, right? Like, hey, we want to be this big thing. We want to do that thing. So we're working to there, but we have to recognize, we have to be honest that, just because we want this doesn't mean we have this. And
Mhm.
let's make sure that we're articulating that and sharing that with our
Right.
leaders so that they rightfully put the appropriate amount of goals and expectations on a team of 1 or 2 versus a team of 100.
Right.
Yes. And what you just brought out there also means that if this is their ideas going forward or how they want to grow, they need to start planning the budget for that.
Yep.
And that's sometimes where things tend to fall down, right?
Mhm.
Is they see one person, two people being able to do all these things, and they don't realize all the hats that they're really wearing. And they
Right.
just want to keep it growing and growing and growing. And then, if you show these type of pictures out there and say, look, you're right, here's where we are today, here's 1 year, here's 5 years, then start planning the budget to increase over time to bring in the additional people, right? Because you're going to have to do that, or you'll just burn somebody out, and they'll leave and go somewhere else. So
Kevin, you are spot on. And I think putting dollar amounts on these things really helps with articulating that, right? So let's say, and Jack, presuming I don't delete everything by accident again, and I'm able to recover again. Woo, live recovery. That was awesome. I'll share these out on my Git repo. We'll put these out, make these available for you. This also helps telling that story, right? So you could tell a story of like, okay, let's say you have two, today you have 2 people or one or 2 people. And these people are, let's just say 100,000 a piece. So we'll keep it real simple, right? So that's 200,000. Throw in some um, uh, other variation, right? Like there's other costs, but let's keep it simple at 100,000.
mhm.
Well, here we've just gone to $400,000 in expenses, and then here, I mean, honestly, support's not just one person. Nobody has just one, right? Like, your support's a whole team, and they're probably, distributed across the globe, and
Mhm.
but okay, so there's a 500,000 here, and your architects, well, they're not $100,000 a piece. Let's say they're 200,000 a piece. So, and your IT admins are no longer one either, right? Now you've got 3 of those guys, so you're at 4 million here.
Mhm.
Throw in a 500,000 here. It's very easy to get to okay, this is $20 million in annual spend, right? And and
The
like
team that
the
Mark will never see.
right. But I think a lot of companies misunderstand or don't understand how powerful and effective a handful of team members are at being able to rapidly go through and iterate and deliver on solutions, right?
Yeah.
The number of times I've heard of a team like this all of a sudden losing someone, and then what they end up doing to replace this person. So I think it's going to be one person. It's not. So then they add in another and another and another. And all of a sudden, they've got a dozen or more people together to replace that one key individual that left. Right. And so, frankly, I think a lot of times it's very easy if you're a key person to make that case like, hey, you know what? I'm worth 10x of what I'm getting paid, because replacing me would require all of these additional people. And this is far less efficient when you have more people than it is to have those two key people who deliver. So
I
And
think the mistake I see made more is that key person leaves and they just say, "Oh, well, they were doing these 3 things, so let's spread that out to 3 other people." right, that
Yep.
already exists are doing, and we'll just add that onto them, and they don't realize, how many different hats they were probably wearing and doing those three things.
And
So,
I think that that's a key point, Kevin. And I like that you brought up bringing awareness to all the hats and talking about a budget, because I it's good for me to see all the hats that I'm potentially wearing. I'm not wearing all of
mhm.
them, but I'm wearing many of them. And I think part of the growth in our organization is definitely going to be bringing awareness to managers and executives about, if we're growing and we enjoy these capabilities, this is going to be coming down the road as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and so kind of going back to your original question, right? Of with Fabric allowing you to do more,
Hmm.
and everything.
Hmm.
What do you see the roles changing? And I think what Chris laid out as in the enterprise one, right? I think there's the potential. Like when we first started building this slide out with you, we didn't put data architect on there.
Hmm.
But I think because as you're going to expand into doing more with notebooks, Python, right?
Yeah.
You could start out and be successful very quickly,
Yeah.
like how you solved your one JSON problem. But eventually you're going to look at all these different things, and you're going to have to pull a little bit of skill set from what the data architect would typically do.
Yeah.
So I think
Yes.
it's good that we called out all these different roles, and you
Sure.
could maybe see this progression.
And I think the automation affords people like me that are working with models and writing DAX by hand. I think it's going to afford me more time to expand into other roles. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about that from an education standpoint as well.
Well, and then what I would also hope, right, is it's going to also educate you on influencing the others in the business of when you need to add more people, right?
Sure.
Because you're going to learn a little bit more about it, but that may not be what you want to do in your day in, day
Right.
out, right? Because you want to
Right.
get back to the value of putting that report together, or the story that you were able to put together, that you go out to the body shop clients that you have and be able to sell them on things and get that, because that's where the money is made, right?
Yeah.
And if that's
Yeah.
what you're good at, you want to know a little bit about all these other type of things, but
Hmm.
you want to get you
Hmm.
back on making that money,
Yeah,
right? So
I'm really passionate about the business side, the storytelling, the development, but I want to bring expanded self-service to the company. I
mhm.
I, I want to have more analysts and maybe developers using a Fabric type tool, and so it takes me down to IT.
Yeah,
It takes me
Yep.
down to IT looking for that person that can team up with us in order to do that. Because I know it's more than just my local model now, right?
yeah. So
Well,
good.
and I think there's a couple questions that I think are also
Mhm.
important here. That Regia asked on LinkedIn about, like, hey, will data engineering be? Oh no, that's not the right one. Where did Regia go? Okay, here you go. Sorry. Will Azure OpenAI service include ChatGPT? Will be eliminate different data roles because one or less people can perform multiple tasks using output from ChatGPT? And I think honestly, I really like Christopher's response here, where he says, "I think not. A data handyman is a voice in their ear. Handymen rarely put electricians out of business." And
Yeah.
I
I
think
like
that's
That's good.
that response, right?
yep.
Again, as you hear a lot, and I tend to believe it also. The prompt engineering, right? Will all the Chat GPT stuff, the co-pilots that are coming, is it going to help you serve these multiple roles? Definitely, it's going to help you
Mhm.
get into it faster and do it just a little bit better. But as you grow, it's still not going to eliminate the need to maybe add on somebody that can
Yeah.
handle, if you're doing 5 roles today, you might need to add a person and separate it 2 and 3 or something.
Right.
Yep.
Did we hit all the questions, Chris? Because
I
I know
think
we're coming down.
I think we have, and I don't have my slide ready for lightning round, but I think we have hit all of the questions. So, um, so we are heading down to the wire, and I do want to make sure that we like thank everyone for joining in. And Mark, I know it's very early for you, which I didn't realize that. I'm just now realizing how early it is for you. So thank you so much for getting up and getting into your office and joining us today. That's awesome.
My pleasure. I wouldn't have missed it. It's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, it was great. I think you added a lot to this conversation. I was glad. I was really intrigued with the question when you sent it to me a while ago, and the conversations we had, I knew you would be able to knock it out of the park like you did here. Thanks again.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys.
Well, yep. And thank you to everyone who's on the live stream for joining us today and getting into these topics. Next week, we're going to be back again, Fabric Fridays, 7:30 a.m. Where's my I got a little plug thing for that. There we go. Fabric Fridays, 7:30 a.m. Central Daylight or CDT.
I just say Central Time. That way I don't have to worry about when it changes.
So confused.
Mark's waking up early.
Yes. Well, thank you, Mark. Do turn us on like on your run or when you're out walking the dog or whatnot. We're going through stuff. There is a replay. You can come back and join us there. So we're happy to have you guys. We'll be talking more about fabric next week, running through some different examples. Might get into some code bases. I will make this presentation available. I have saved it. It's now available. I'll post that out onto Git, and I will make sure that you guys get links to it. I'll post that into the YouTube comments down below, and I'll tweet the tweet and is it X? I'll X, and I will post on LinkedIn. Right? What's it called? Is it Exit?
I think it's just X. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a platform formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah. So we're no longer tweeting. What are we doing? We don't know yet. But
yeah, all right. Good deal. All right. Well, thank you guys all so very much. You guys have a fantastic day, and we will see you next week.
All right.
Peace.
Thanks.
Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.